At my daughter's wedding, they hid me by the kitchen, but I held the contract that ended it all. Margaret Lee stood just beyond the swinging kitchen doors of Willowbrook Country Club, smoothing the worn navy blue fabric of her skirt beneath fluorescent hallway lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The scent of fresh-cut roses drifted from the banquet hall, where laughter and music swirled like a distant storm she wasn't invited to join. This was her daughter Olivia's wedding day. The day anyone might have imagined Margaret glowing with pride, standing beside her daughter as guests toasted and danced. Instead, she held a white place card that read "Reserved Family" and was gently guided toward a small card table shoved into a corner, barely visible through the half-open kitchen entrance. As she settled into the rickety folding chair, an unmistakable wave of humiliation rippled through her. The servers and caterers swept past with quick, purposeful steps, never quite meeting her eyes. Nearby guests glanced over, their brows knitting in surprise or suspicion at the sight of the quiet woman in the back, faded by the room's grandeur. Her throat tightened when she overheard the coordinator murmur, just loud enough, "Keep things smooth with Mrs. Lee. She's sensitive." The words clicked like cold stones in her gut, a subtle warning, a fragile label pinned to her shoulders. Margaret's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse, dipping inside to grasp the thick envelope she'd insisted on carrying, the printed wedding contract she had so carefully negotiated with the venue director months ago. It was the detail her ex-husband Peter openly ignored, even as he claimed control over the guest list and seating plans. On that yellowed paper, her name was still inscribed with authority alongside Olivia's. It was more than paper. It was a lifeline, a quiet reminder that she had more power today than she appeared to have. Every now and then, when the kitchen doors swung open wider, the sight of her daughter Olivia fluttered past, a glowing bride in white, yet carrying the same tension Margaret felt. Olivia's smile trembled, eyes briefly scanning the crowded room, though she never once came back that way. The cracks in the polished day ran deeper than words. Margaret's heart slowed into a gentle, steady rhythm as she tried to breathe past the embarrassment and the weight of a room that seemed to have forgotten her. The hum of the band tuning up floated faintly, promising celebration beyond her invisible corner. But a knot of unease settled in her chest. Something wasn't right, and beneath the hum of polite chatter, a quiet storm was building. She clutched the contract again, a lifeline under the indifferent lights, hoping that behind this curtain of dismissal, her stand for dignity would not be in vain. Margaret's hands tightened around the thin armrest of her chair as she finally pushed through the kitchen doors, stepping into the softly lit ballroom. Her frame seemed to shrink as eyes flicked away or narrowed in quiet judgment. At the head table, Peter smiled broadly, shaking hands and cracking jokes with business partners, his laughter warm and loud. Beside him, Diane moved with the effortless grace of someone who belonged, distributing small gift bags with a smile too rehearsed to be genuine. Margaret's chest ached as she followed their glances away from her, toward the table set right in front of the room where Olivia sat, surrounded by a tangle of friends and relatives, all faces turned forward, none looking back. Diane's voice drifted over, syrupy but cold. "The seating chart was so tricky to manage, Margaret. We just thought this arrangement would be easier, less drama." She handed Margaret a sterile smile, eyes glinting with an almost imperceptible edge of warning. Olivia, catching her mother's gaze for barely a flash, nodded politely but didn't dare interrupt. Her hands clasped tightly in her lap, lips pressed thin with nerves. Margaret's eyes fell to the round table's centerpiece, a vase crowded with wild roses and greenery, familiar and tender. They were her signature from the flower shop, arranged on a whim. A quiet gift in a room full of overdone extravagance. Despite the warm bloom, a sharp sting crept under her skin, a reminder that here, her offerings were just tokens, overlooked and overshadowed by polished facades. Off to the side, a young server whispered urgently to the floor manager, barely audible but heavy with tension. The vendor hasn't been paid yet. If that balance doesn't clear by the end of today, the reception has to stop. The manager nodded, rubbing his forehead as the edges of their voices faded into the hum of jovial conversations. The mention of payment wove a thread of unspoken worry through the evening's festivities, like a dark undertow beneath the sparkling chandeliers. Margaret's breath caught when she realized the weight of the room's quiet pulse. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a precarious balancing act, with invisible stakes far beyond romantic vows. The clock on the wall ticked toward the evening's end, each second a reminder that the day's celebration could unravel if unseen agreements weren't honored. For a moment, the room's brightness dimmed to a blur as Margaret let herself lean against the corner wall. A small smile flickered across her lips as she touched the smooth edge of an envelope nestled in her purse, the contract she had fought for, the one clause that gave her the power no one else seemed to respect. Behind Diane's poised smile and Peter's confident front lay fragility Margaret sensed but was yet to expose. Gathering what strength she could, she brushed a stray lock of hair from her face and squared her shoulders. Tonight wasn't over. Not yet. And sometimes, the quietest resolve held the most dangerous promise. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. Margaret stepped away from the hidden kitchen corner, hoping to find a place among the crowd, anywhere but the invisible space she'd been confined to all evening. Her heels clicked softly on the polished marble floor as she moved toward a cluster of guests near the bar. She cleared her throat and tried smiling, but an usher approached almost immediately, his polite tone thin and firm. "Ma'am, this area's for VIP family only." Margaret's smile faltered, replaced by a flush she couldn't hide. "I'm Olivia's mother," she said quietly, her voice barely above the background music. "I should be—" "We appreciate that, ma'am," he interrupted, "but seating assignments are strict tonight. I'm sure you understand." The weight of his words knocked the breath from her lungs. She turned away, shoulders slumping as she slipped back toward her table, the room suddenly feeling impossibly large and cold. Nearby, the photographer clicked through portraits, coming to the arranged family shot. Yet he skipped her completely, motioning for the group without even a glance in her direction. Each snapshot reinforced her sense of exclusion. Margaret's eyes burned as she retreated to her corner, fingers nervously twisting the thin gold chain of her necklace. The thought of turning around, slipping out unnoticed, crossed her mind with a sharp pang. The soft murmur of laughter and clinking glasses seeped through the kitchen door, like a world she no longer belonged to. She swallowed the sting, biting back tears she refused to shed here. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a flicker of hope caught her attention. Olivia glanced her way, eyes meeting Margaret's for a brief, pained moment before darting away. Her daughter looked trapped beneath the smiles, hands clenched tightly on the tablecloth as if holding herself together. At that instant, Margaret's resolve hardened. She wasn't invisible. Not yet. In the quiet recesses of her purse, she touched the envelope once more, recalling that vital clause she'd insisted on when paying for nearly the whole event. If payment wasn't received by a precise time, the venue reserved the right to suspend services. Earlier, she had overheard a quiet but tense conversation between Diane and the club manager, Diane whispering, "We've got it covered, I promise." But something about their words had sounded strained, forced. Margaret's breath steadied. This contract was more than an assortment of signatures. It was the key, and it might be the only chance left to turn this day around. Not with anger, but with quiet determination. She glanced at the clock. The hour was approaching faster than she liked. The party buzzed on, but beneath the surface, the rules she'd made sure to secure in writing held a secret power, waiting for the right moment to unfold. In that fragile space between seeking acceptance and standing firm, Margaret found a sliver of light that didn't flicker, even in shadows. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. Her fight wasn't over. Not tonight, not ever. A music swelled as the band launched into the first dance, a gentle melody that curled through the grand ballroom like smoke. Margaret sat alone near the swinging kitchen doors, fingers curled tightly on the edge of her chair. The laughter and clinking glasses floated out from the room's bright center, but they felt miles away, as if she were trapped beneath glass, separated from every smiling face and sparkling gown. The soft thud of the heavy doors swinging shut behind her echoed sharply, a dull reminder of the chasm between her and the celebration. Her breath hitched when a burst of carefree laughter rose louder from the crowd, so full of light and belonging, a sound that stabbed through her chest. The polished floor glittered under chandeliers, but Margaret's vision blanched to gray, the colors drained from her world. A cold knot tightened deep inside her, and for a moment, her hands trembled with the weight of silent questions she dared not ask. Pulling her purse closer, she checked her phone, hopeful for a message, anything that might anchor her. The screen lit up with a single text, sent early that morning. "Happy day, Mom. Love you. Sorry." From Olivia. The words felt like a small lifeline, but also a bittersweet echo, distant and unable to reach across the growing gap. No other notifications, no calls, just silence. With a shaky hand, Margaret rummaged into the depths of her bag and pulled out the thick envelope she'd carried all evening. The soft rustle of the paper kept pace with her racing heart. She scanned its printed pages until her eyes locked on a highlighted passage, the legal language crisp and clear amidst the chaos. Final payment due by 7 p.m. Otherwise, all reserved services will be rescinded after one courtesy warning. Her gaze flickered to the large clock mounted near the ballroom entrance. The minute hand hovered at 6:57, inching steadily toward the deadline. In that moment, the weight shifted. This contract, once a mere formality, a handshake in ink, now held the quiet power to change everything. It was more than paper. It was a promise and a threat wrapped into one. The distant chatter slowed in her ears. She could almost hear the ticking of the minutes, a countdown pounding in her chest. Behind the kitchen doors, the warmth faded, and the humming light felt colder, sharper. She swallowed the lump in her throat and smoothed her skirt, the fabric cool under her fingertips, but unable to soothe the fire simmering inside. Margaret's fingers tightened around the heavy envelope, a tangible anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The day teetered on the edge of collapse and triumph, and she found herself caught in the fragile space between despair and resolve. The looming clock wasn't just a witness, it was a judge, silently calling time on the favor and patience that had been stretched too thin. Outside the clamor, behind the laughter and music, Margaret felt the stirrings of a quiet reckoning. The contract held a promise not yet fulfilled, a promise that the night might still bend toward justice, if only she had the courage to see it through. When dignity finally speaks, who tends to listen in your world? Margaret took a steadying breath as she stepped away from the distant clamor of the ballroom and made her way through the service corridors behind the scenes. This was the quiet world where things happened out of sight. Decisions made, consequences set in motion, far from limelight and applause. Her footsteps echoed softly along the tiled floor, each one a heartbeat of purpose. Jason, the young manager she had met months ago when helping his family's floral delivery get started, waited near the office door. His face was a mixture of relief and tension, the burden of responsibility etched in the crease between his brows. "Mrs. Lee?" he said quietly. "I didn't expect to see you here. What's going on?" Margaret didn't hesitate. From her purse, she pulled the thick envelope, sliding it across the desk to him with a measured calm. "This is the signed contract for Olivia's wedding," she said, voice firm, even as her heart fluttered beneath her ribs. "Look closely at the payment terms." Jason unfolded the document, his eyes scanning the typed clauses. Margaret pointed, grounding her words in the paper's reality. Clause 7B. The final payment was due before tonight's event, by 7 p.m. There's a policy that all reserved services must end if payment isn't cleared after one courtesy warning. Jason's expression flickered. "I know about the policy. The balance from Diane still hasn't come through." He tapped on his tablet, pulling up the ledger, a number blinking stubbornly red. If I don't act, they'll blame us for letting it go on. But if I stop the event tonight, the fallout could be worse. Margaret nodded, understanding the bind. But if it's not settled soon, policy is policy. They must hold to the deadline. He hesitated. A rare crack in his professional facade revealing the pressure he was under. You realize this could wind up hurting Olivia, right? I do, Margaret said quietly. But the truth needs to be clear. Any further silence only hurts everyone more. They shared a glance, heavy with unspoken stakes, a fragile alliance forming in the shadow of the moment. Behind the office door, muffled laughter echoed from the guests, thick with warmth and illusion. Here, decisions carried weight. Here, consequences gathered like storm clouds. Jason pulled a printed copy of the contract's contested clause, placing it beside Margaret's own receipt, a cashier's check she had written and submitted weeks ago, evidence that she had fulfilled her commitment in full. This is your proof, Mrs. Lee, Jason said. It's solid. A quiet determination settled over her. This was no longer about embarrassment or sidelining. It was about fairness and preserving the dignity Olivia deserved. But if this gamble failed, it would cut deeper than the festering tension between former family members. It might close doors forever. Margaret pressed a hand to the cool, smooth surface of the desk, feeling the pulse of the moment. The clock would soon strike 7, and the fragile balance would tip. But for the first time tonight, the power felt firmly in her grasp. Tonight was more than a celebration. It was a turning point. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. The murmur swelled to curious whispers as Jason stepped quietly to the front of the room, clearing his throat to catch attention. The band's melody paused, leaving a tense hush in the golden-lit ballroom. Margaret felt every eye pivot toward them, a spotlight emerging from the shadows where she'd been confined. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening as Jason unfolded the contract with an air of calm determination. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice clear and measured, we have an important matter to address regarding tonight's event. His gaze lifted to the head table, where Diane's smile flickered and Peter's confident posture stiffened, cracks showing beneath their polished veneer. Jason's fingers traced to the highlighted clause, then to Margaret's receipt resting beside him, a proof of payment she held close all night. According to this signed agreement, he said, final payment was due by 7 p.m. without confirmation of full settlement by that time. The venue's policy requires suspension of all reserved services after a warning. His eyes briefly met Margaret's, an unspoken encouragement passing between them. Diane's facade faltered, lips parting in a hesitant apology, but Peter stepped forward, voice shaking beneath rehearsed calm. There's been a delay in processing the payment. It's being taken care of. His glance darted to Margaret, and for a fleeting moment, something like regret flickered there, an honesty he quickly masked. The room's atmosphere thickened as Olivia approached, confusion mingling with quiet hope in her eyes. She stood beside Jason, a fragile presence amid the shifting dynamics. Margaret's heart thudded. This was more than a contractual clause. It was a turning point. Jason nodded toward the staff managing the event behind the scenes. Unless payment clears within the next few minutes, we are obligated to act in accordance with policy. A nervous ripple passed through guests, some exchanging glances, others whispering questions. Diane's smile wavered, tension etching her jawline. Peter's stern front softened as he glanced at Olivia, then back at Margaret with a faint nod that bordered on acknowledgement. Margaret, steady now, reached into her purse and quietly handed Jason the official cashier's check receipt she'd kept throughout the evening. Her voice was calm but unwavering. This is proof of payment, fully settled weeks ago. It was meant to cover the entire event. Jason held the document up for a brief, solemn second, then turned to the crowd. The payment has been fulfilled, he said, with measured certainty. Any misunderstanding aside, Mrs. Lee's commitment made tonight possible. We will continue the celebration as planned. An audible shift passed through the room. Eyes that once glanced past Margaret now met her gaze with newfound respect. Even Diane's expression softened, tension loosening slightly, while Peter's shoulders slumped as the reality settled in. The very air seemed to change. Quiet justice had been served, not with anger or spectacle, but with the quiet power of truth and persistence. Margaret's dignity, long hidden, found its moment to shine. If a moment like this ever hit close to home, I'd love to hear how you found your way forward. Jason's voice rose above the murmur, clear and deliberate. He held the contract and the embellished receipt Margaret had quietly handed him earlier, evidence of a commitment both honored and ignored. The crowd, once distracted by their clinking glasses and whispered conversations, gradually fell silent, eyes turning toward the unfolding confrontation. This oversight, Jason began, his gaze steady as it swept the room, was not Mrs. Lee's doing. This receipt confirms full payment was made weeks before today. The responsibility for any lapse lies elsewhere. His words resonated with quiet authority, slicing through the tension like a cool breeze. Diane's practiced composure cracked. Her lips parted, eyebrows knitting in remorse, as she muttered, I apologize. The delay was unintentional. I never wanted this to affect the day. Her voice trembled with sincerity, the polished mask slipping to reveal the pressure she'd been under, struggling to maintain appearances while juggling financial snares behind the scenes. Peter lingered nearby, his earlier arrogance softened under the weight of revelation. For a moment, he avoided Margaret's steady gaze, then spoke with a hesitant tone. Margaret, thank you for your part in this. His words faltered, tangled in years of unspoken grievances and buried respect. Without hesitation, Olivia stepped forward, her relief mingling with embarrassment. She wrapped Margaret in a warm embrace, an act that spoke louder than any apology or explanation could. The two women stood, framed by the room's soft glow, a testament to resilience and the enduring strength of family bonds. Guests, once distant and aloof, shifted in their seats, faces warming into smiles and nods. Whispers of support blossomed into genuine applause, clapping that grew steady and sincere. The atmosphere transformed from one of quiet judgment to celebration of Margaret's dignity reclaimed. The maitre d' approached, clearing a space beside the family table. Mrs. Lee, please join them, he said with respectful warmth, motioning toward the place reserved now not by accident, but by rightful acknowledgement. Margaret's heart lifted, the bitter taste of exclusion replaced by the sweet recognition of belonging. She stepped forward, her navy blue suit catching the light, a symbol not just of resilience, but of renewed respect. Tonight, the truth was seen, justice quietly served, and a mother's love vindicated, not with grand gestures, but with honest, undeniable proof. The room held its breath, then celebrated, as Margaret took her place, not in the shadows, but at the heart of the celebration she had helped create. The clapping slowly died down, and a quiet warmth spread across the room that had once been thick with tension. Margaret rose from her seat behind the kitchen doors and, for the first time that evening, walked confidently into the light. Her navy blue suit caught the glow of the chandeliers, modest yet dignified, a reflection of the quiet strength she'd shown all night. The guests, seeing her not as a sidelined guest, but as the woman who had held the day together, turned to greet her with nods and smiles. Olivia, radiant despite the day's strains, reached out and took her mother's hand, leading her to the family table, now rearranged so that Margaret sat beside her daughter. The once hidden seat had become a place of honor. Margaret settled in, fingers still lightly touching the thick envelope that had shifted the night's course. The contract, the proof of integrity and resolve. The room buzzed gently again, but this time with genuine celebration. Staff and guests floated by with warm congratulations, pausing to exchange grateful glances with Margaret. The simple kindnesses mattered. A friendly word from the caterer, a respectful nod from the venue manager. the subtle shift of positions on the seating chart that recognized her rightful place. As the cake was served, glasses raised, Olivia's voice rang clear and proud. "To my mother, who gave us roots, not just roses." The toast echoed through the hall, carrying more than words. It carried the story of a woman who had weathered humiliation and doubt, who had fought not with anger, but with dignity. Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears, but they were tears of quiet joy. She met each gaze not as someone overlooked, but as someone respected and seen. There was no need for loud declarations. Her courage spoke softly, but powerfully. In that moment, Margaret knew her worth would never again be defined by where she was placed or how others tried to diminish her. It lived in the strength to stand with kindness, even from behind kitchen doors. The past no longer weighed heavily. Instead, it became the foundation for a future marked by grace and perseverance. As the music swelled again and laughter resumed, Margaret's hand rested lightly on Olivia's, a gentle anchor in the flow of celebration. The day had turned, a new chapter beginning, not with grand upheaval, but with steady, humble victory. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.